line with the increase of electricity tariff hike, discourse have actually alerted consumers of the increase of tariff from July 1st, which is on Saturday. Good morning. Welcome to the Dailies on Eco Television International, where we'll be looking at many other stories that of interest to you this morning. I am Sele Elisha Dasham, and Rachel Tanzi is here with me. Good morning.
Good morning, Sele.
How you doing?
I'm fine. How's your weekend?
Great. My weekend was a bit hectic, but we thank God we're strong and healthy this morning.
Yeah.
Yes, to our viewers, we are live on Facebook and on YouTube. Please do well to drop your comment, your thoughts of any story that is of interest to you this morning. And let us go through the papers, starting with Daily Independent newspaper.
On Daily Independent, Serap keeps over CBN's demand of customers' social media handles, threatens lawsuits. 50 killed, 170 houses razed in Imo communities, OIC president alleges. You can start with the details on the front page and continue inside the paper. The big story on the paper: federal government may revive economy by unlocking $1 trillion in asset sale. Proceeds may tackle debt burden and provide infrastructure. This cost allowed consumers of tariff increase July 1st. Police to probe killing of man over alleged blasphemy in Sokoto. We have a writer that says Governor Aliyu calls for calm. And on oil subsidy removal, CSOs decry alleged exclusion by NLC in negotiation with federal government. Zenith Bank CFO wins Chief Financial Officer of the Year award. You can find the details on page 6. Aviation players upbeat on back of exchange rates unification. You can start with the details on the front page and continue inside the paper. The downside of the paper, we have Lagos government opens shelter for survivors of domestic violence. You can find the details on page 29, and we have a picture story where we can see the award being given to the CFO of Zenith Bank, and that's all the news on Daily Independent.
On the leadership newspaper, Zenith Bank, Adam wins the CFO of the year. You can find a story on page 26 of the leadership newspaper. And on Hajj, all 95,000 Nigeria pilgrims to be at Arafat tomorrow. Another story still on the leadership newspaper: labor fear job losses as discussed raise electricity tariff. You can find that story on page 7. And on the 10th National Assembly, Akpabio calm dismisses plan upset in Senate. You can find that story on page 7. The big story for the leadership is on insecurity. Hope raises for northern businesses with new service chiefs, with the writer following on the leadership. Insecurity hindering revival of region economy coming from industrialize. How banditry stole 30 billion naira milk factories, Zanguru Dam in Niger State. Coming from the IGP meets police squadron today. You can find detail of all the story on page 4. Still on the leadership newspaper, Serap to CBN withdraw regulation on customers SM handles, that is social media handles. You can find all of that story on page 6. And on Naira, importers groan as custom raises exchange rate to 589.45 kobo naira per dollar. You can find detail of that. And we also have mob kill man accused of blasphemy in Sokoto State. You can find detail of that story inside the paper. We have a lot of story. We have a picture story as well here. You can do all to grab the leadership and read detail of stories of interest to you.
On the Abuja Inquirer, how Yes Father decided Benue Global polls. A report, you can find the details on page 3. We have the big story that says Apaguba Toyo orders to tenable Nigerians experiencing hardship. And we have UK envoy waiting for Tinubu to appoint ministers. And that's all the news on the Abuja Inquirer.
Alright, let's take a look at Nigerian News Direct with the story The Butter Leaf Plantum Award of NCC Performance. You can find that story on page 2. And on food safety, NAFDAC vows to enforce good hygiene practice in bread production. I think it's very important, not just the bread production, but other food as well. But they are making emphasis here on bread production. And still we have Serap tells CBN withdraw regulation on customer social media handles or face legal action. You can find detail on page 2 of Nigerian News Direct. The big story, all eyes on Tinubu's cabinet. The writer following the story, UK eyes formation of cabinet to strengthen economic relations. Prioritize merit over political patronage coming from Arewa Economic Forum. Appoint experienced technocrats to lead power sector coming from the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. You can find all that story on page 21. And All African Business Leaders Award, Zenith Bank CFO Adam emerges Chief Financial Officer of the Year. You can find more story on page 2. 50 people killed, 170 houses burned in Imo community. Coming from the President and Ohanese Youth Council. You can find detail of that story inside the paper. We have 2 picture story as well on the front page. Do well to grab the paper, read detail of stories of interest to you.
On Nigerian Tribune, over 127,000 Nigerian students in UK higher institutions. This is a report coming from the British High Commissioner. Fluctuation in airfares traced to federal government's unification of dollar market. IATA has no power to peg naira to dollar, coming from NANTA president. You can find the details on page 3. The big story on Nigerian Tribune, Nigeria's public debt rises to 49 trillion naira. You can find the details on page 6. Tribute as renowned mass communication professor Lai also dies in car crash. Kano court restrains Governor Yusuf from demolishing buildings. You can find the details on page 30. Nigeria's maritime industry loses $100 billion annually over non-implementation of Cabotage Act. The details can be found on page 7. Increasing suspense over Tinubu's ministerial nominations. And on subsidy removal, Nigerians must reduce wastage, invest more, be innovative. A statement coming from experts. Survival becoming more difficult for us, coming from private school owners. You can find the details on page 25 and 2, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Daily Times newspaper on 2023, Hajj 6 Nigerian pilgrims dead. You can find detail of the story on the front page and continue to read more inside the paper. Soldiers intercept oil-laden Bakri boats in Niger Delta. You can find more of that story inside the paper. Fallout of royal criticism. I will never fight with Oba of Benin, coming from the former minister. And downside of the paper, we have World Bank Group to work with private sector to scale up investment in emerging markets. You can find detail of that on page 20. We have a picture story here. You can do well to grab the paper and read detail of the story on the front page.
On New Telegraph newspaper, revenue generation. Federal government agencies receive 129.25 billion naira collection fee. And on diversification, 12.8 trillion naira worth of goods proceeds for export. You can find the details on page 17. Coming from additional African Development Bank will support Tinubu's government with Youth Bank in Nigeria. Why virtual court sitting is dying by lawyers. We have rising cost of ingredients don't compromise bread quality. NAFDAC is warning bakers. You can find the details on page 5. There will be gas revolution in Nigeria soon, a statement coming from the NNPCL. The big story on New Telegraph, Hajj 2023, Nigeria loses 5 pilgrims in Saudi Arabia, records 1 birth, 2 miscarriages, 30 diagnosed with mental challenges. You can find the details on page 4. We accepted Akpabio's victory because process was transparent, statement coming from KAU. Serap to CBN withdraw regulations on customer social media handles. Or politics of power transfer battle for APC Guba ticket. This is current situation in Ondo. You can find the details on page 9 and 10. We have a report Nigerians got more U.S. visas than Canadians in 2022. UK to explore 6 areas with Tinubu's incoming ministers. The details can be found on page 3 and 4. Kogi election may not hold if violence persists, coming from ACF chair warning. And the downside, we have a study that says dentures may cause pneumonia. The details can be found on page 26, and that's all the news on New Telegraph newspaper.
On the Matrix newspaper, Bill Gates is saying, I'm lucky to have Dangote as friend. You want to know why he said that? Do well to read the story on the front page and continue to read more on page 4 of the Matrix newspaper. And also we have CBN tell banks to monitor political appointees' account regularly. You can find detail of that story on page 16 of the paper. And also we have on electricity supply, Disco snub NLC to increase tariff next week, which is actually this week on Saturday. Side increase in exchange rate of Naira $2. Advise customers of bulk purchase to beat the expected increment. Organized labor may embark on strike, and we have detail of that story. And I think it's important to say little, even though we've been talking about it through last week till today. We've seen that throughout when we had that of the increment, or talking about the increase of electricity tariff, the hike, and then said it's starting from July 1st, and the increment was by 40%. And a lot of people have come out to say it's not fair to Nigerians. We've had Labour coming out, SERAP talking about it, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria even talking about all of this, saying that this will lead to a lot of people losing their jobs, small and medium enterprises really not being favorable at a time like this. And we record that Bill Gates said that small and medium enterprises can actually take advantage of the solar energy rather than depending on the fuel or either on even the normal electricity that we use in the country. But a lot of things, it's actually boils down to what the government is willing to do. Of course, I agree that it takes baby steps to actually achieve certain big, record big achievement. But then at a time like this, a lot of people are saying that this is not right to Nigerians. We're still yet to hear what the palliative are for them, the back and forth. Nothing has come out of it. We've seen 1 week have gone or 2 weeks have gone to the 8 weeks that the Labour and the federal government will come up with the minimum wage for civil servants. And then we've seen that even civil societies are coming out to say that NLC is refusing them to be part of the negotiation of whatever it will be concerning the oil subsidy removal. But a lot of this still boils down to what do you want the common man to do? Remember, we had a caller last week that was giving us an analysis of how it was back then when you get a unit. Back then when you get a unit for 1,000 naira, you're sure to get about 30 or so, or even more. Units, But right now, for 1,000 naira, you're just sure of maybe just 12 units, 11 units, and then that means you have to cut down usage in the house, either offing your bulbs or offing the TV, or not using of kettle, or not using of burner, or even the iron, a lot of things. And then we've seen that because of that, even on the paper, it's saying that Nigerians should reduce wastage and be more innovative. But then how can you be innovative when the environment is not even conducive enough for you to even think and be creative to come up with things? I'm having maybe possibly a small shop, and then I am expected to actually, from there, I feed my family, take care of whatever I do. We've seen even private schools are complaining. It's becoming difficult, of course. So imagine if you have to run on diesel in school, you have to on the gem for students to study, and a lot of things, you have to preserve food that they have to eat. And then we've seen the cost of diesel, we've seen that electricity has been increased. So a lot of things are actually very heavy for the common man to swallow. We've seen that even the dollar have increased, talking about custom, and they say they have nothing to do with that because the CBN that regulate the monetary policy, they have nothing to do with that. So a lot of things tend to be very heavy for the common man to take in. And I keep saying that, why do the common man have to be the one to sacrifice at the end of the day? Why don't we see our leaders sacrificing? We remember on the paper when we saw the salary increment for political holders, and even though the presidency came out to say no, there is no move whatsoever, of course there was no move. It was just a proposal, possibly. What do you think about that? But then, you know the way things are, most times in Nigeria, there's always no smoke without a fire. They might
True.
have been, because the chairman came out to say it wasn't a rumor. They wanted to.
Yeah,
But the
sure.
presidency may be looking at the things that are happening. And I said,
Happening,
why
yeah.
don't we have a downward review of the salary
Yeah.
rather than an upward review? Because if looking at certain allowances they receive, you know that a lot of things need to be cut short at a time where we still have internal debt. We are having, even talking about debt outside the country. A lot of things need to be considered. So these guys are saying they don't care what NLC is saying. They are increasing the electricity tariff from July 1st, which is on Saturday. What are we now doing to make sure that the common man does not feel this effect? What are the moves? What are the, we keep saying we don't let the country or leaders don't just come up with policy, but think about the common man. What have you provided for them to take care of them? That is to say that possibly maybe, because of course they pay subsidy for electricity. So that is to say that the common man, maybe the subsidy is being removed gradually. So the common man will have to pay for everything eventually. So we are hoping to see what the NLC, because they are actually threatening a strike as it is. So we hope to see what will be the outcome. Of course, we know when things like this come out, there's always a meeting. But our desire is that the meeting don't end in deadlock as usual. So we hope to see what the government would do, what the House would do, and then a lot of things eyes are on Nigeria at this point in time. So we hope something positive come out of all of this.
You know, Stella, when I see experts giving advice on papers, I ask myself these questions. Are these experts Nigerians? Because if you are a Nigerian and you are an expert, you know that like virtually every Nigerian is frugal. And by frugal, I mean live below their means. There is no Nigerian household that I know, and you also can testify, and I believe every other person, that doesn't have many alternatives for energy consumption. You go to a house, for long the water board have not been consistent. You will see that a house will have will be connected to the water board, for example, and will still have a pumping machine in the house. You go to a house, you see them having stove, you see them having a coal pot for using gas, you see them having gas, you see them having electric cool. Like,
let's go down to the common man, even the charcoal and
we
even
have
the
charcoal,
firewood.
we use firewood, we have energy alternatives all around because Nigerians have been finding ways to cope. But it's just unfortunate for us that our government keeps bringing policies that, regardless of how hard we try to manage our lives, things keep becoming difficult. For example, petrol. There's no alternative to petrol. You need it for your cars. We don't have electric cars in Nigeria. And even if we have electric cars, we won't see the electricity to charge those cars. So what are we saying? When I see experts saying things like, cut down on wastage, and I see Nigerians cutting down on wastage every single day. I see Nigerians who currently don't on their fridge, except they'll on the deep freezer for like 10 hours, let the tomato and the fridge get frozen, and then we off it. I see people that off the whole lights in the house until when it's really, really dark and they can't see, they on it back. You see that some appliances are not being used. They just use the iron for a short period of time. I see Nigerians every single day cutting down wastage, but then what are the government doing to stop the hardship? Because every Nigeria tries every day to live according to their means or below their means. But what can you do? You need to go to work, and now fuel subsidy is removed. Are you going to deal with tariff price? Are we going to talk, am I going to be concerned about buying tariff in bulk because there might be an increase, or am I going to worry about the petrol pump price that keeps going high? And then you just see the Nigerians keep trying to find a way around the hardship, but the government are not doing enough to make sure that that hardship is. Because when I see experts giving suggestions, I was like, but these are suggestions that everyday Nigerians are doing even before now. These are all the things that we've been doing. Are you sure you're a Nigerian giving this advice? Because by now you should know that this has become a common way of living for us. We are just faced with a situation that the government just keeps bringing regulation, because yes, if you're floating and non-investors are the ones determining what the exchange rate will be, of course the custom have no option because it's beyond them now. Of course, they have custom duties have to go high. If the power holding companies are saying dollar is the reason we have to increase our rate, of course, how is it they also have, these are businesses, these are private businesses that need to make profit pay their workers also and all of that. They need to make their profit and all of that. And yes, if the dollar is there, who determined that the dollar went hard? Of course, it's the government. And these are all factors that are affecting, and it just boils down to the government, because you and I here are depending on the government of Nigeria, because they have the resources, they have the power, they have all it takes to make sure that our life is much better. What support do we have is we go out there, we voted the people that we think are capable enough to take the decisions of this country for us and then to help us. And if they're disappointing us, then I think it's just in the position where we can make our voice out there clear and say, okay, you are not doing the right thing, and then we are still sitting down at their mercy hoping that they do the right thing. So Nigerians are facing a lot of hardship, and it at this point now there's nothing people are trekking Sele because of. So what are we trying to say? There is no amount of trying to cope that Nigerians are not doing. It's just left for the government now to step in. Why is the palliative taking long? Why are we still waiting for minimum wage? Can't it be quick about it? Because trust me, if this 114% was to be passed, it's not going to take 8 weeks or 2 months or thereabout before it be implemented. It will be fast. These are the things that we are saying, and we're looking forward to seeing our leaders being selfless. And when it comes to the common man, let them be fast and drastic about the decisions that will help the situation.
Because Richard, this whole thing is more like survival of the fittest. If you're not strong to stay till the end, we truly hope the government do something about it, because it is their responsibility. Still on the Matrix newspaper, we have the big story on the paper that says Tinubu won against selective prosecution, with the rider as call for Buhari past minister, service chief and others probe intensify. Urged to recover looted funds from oil thieves. You can find detail of that story on page 2. Tinubu excited as African Development Bank pledges support toward boosting Nigeria's economy. We can find more inside the paper. Dogara. Okay, we have a story here that says opposition senators raise alarm over plan to impose minority leader. Find detail of that story inside the paper. Mob kill man accused of blasphemy in Sokoto State. Detail found on page 3, and that's all on the Matrix newspaper.
On First News newspaper, 50 kill 179 houses raised as Imo community boils, and we have a picture story showing some of the destruction. Governor Abiodun fell out with me because of Tinubu coming from Benga Daniel. Alleged blasphemy, mob lynches butcher in Sokoto. Lasso Don lie also called wife minutes before vehicle plunged into river. This is a statement coming from a source. Nigeria can earn billions from exporting human feces and cockroaches. These are a statement coming from Don, and you can find the details inside the paper. The big story on First News: electricity prepared to pay higher tariff from next week. Discourse tells Nigerians. Blame development on fluctuation of Naira in exchange rate market. Advise customers using prepaid meters to purchase bulk energy before month end. And we have Nigeria's public debt rises to 49 trillion naira. At the downside of the paper, huge crowd cycle Kaaba as Hajj begins in Saudi. 8 kidnappers who killed INEC employee in Ebonyi arrested. Why naval officers stopped me in U.S. A statement coming from Tinubu, and you can find the details inside the paper. And that's all the news on First News newspaper.
All right, before we continue with other paper review, we would love to take a break at this moment so we can open the phone line. We'd love to hear what your take are concerning the increase of the electricity tariff from July 1st, and also with the fact that customers or consumers have been advised to, purchase bulk energy, and then you begin to ask questions like, how do they tend to do that? This and a lot of questions we hope to get answers. So when we come back from the break, we'll take your calls on any of these stories. Please stay tuned with us. Thanks for staying tuned. It's still the Dailies on Equal Television International. We've been looking at various stories on the paper, where especially that which is actually making most of the paper is that of the increase of the electricity tariff from July 1st, and advices coming from experts on how, consumers can actually buy in bulk to actually avoid the increase or to actually reduce the pain before July 1st. A lot of stories are on the paper, and we hope to hear what your thoughts are concerning the ministerial appointment that even the UK are holding up to, and then a lot of stories that we've seen even from the human angle where someone was killed because of blasphemy in Sokoto State. So we'd love to hear what your takes are. Our number is displayed on your screen at this moment. Please do well to call us and let us hear what your inputs are, please. Do remember to turn down the volume of your TV set when you call us, or you could actually, off the TV totally so we can hear you clearly here. I still have Rachel with me in the studio. Thanks so much, Rachel.
Welcome.
All right, let's look at other papers, and I think we'll be looking at the next paper, which is the Guardian newspaper. 40% hike in vehicle duties worsen transport crisis and poverty. You can find that story on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper. And here we are having a history of custom foreign exchange rate review, looking at the various ways of how the naira has been in relation to dollar have been increasing over the years. So when you go down, you see that the least vehicle duty now is 1.1 million naira for those who be importing vehicle into the country. You know what that implies, right? So you can do well to read more detail of this story on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper. UK await Tinubu's cabinet ready for stronger ties with Nigeria. You can find that story on page 6. And we have 6 Nigerian pilgrims dead, 8 others ill as 2023 Hajj rates begin. Nigeria loses $50 billion yearly to foreign domination, non-implementation of Cabotage Act. You can find that story inside the paper. Community pharmacists decry 15% vaccination rate. You can find all of that story too on page 4, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, population of Nigerian students in UK rose by 107,000 in 3 years. This is coming from the UK Envoy. Zenith Bank CFO Mukhtar wins Africa's award. Largest ever pilgrimage begins in Saudi Arabia. Expert optimistic despite foreign reserve dropped to $34 billion. Eminent Nigerians mourn mass communication professor Lai Oso. You can find the details on page 2. The big story on the paper, why discuss are bent on electricity tariffs increase. AEDC fluctuation of Naira exchange makes upward review inevitable. And we have a statement that says for customers within bands B and C with supply hour ranging from 12 to 16 per day, 12 hour per day, the new base tariff is expected to be 100 Naira per kilowatt. Bands A with 20 hours and above and B 16 plus 20 hours will experience comparatively higher tariff. You can find the details more on the front page and continue inside the paper on page 4, but I believe a circular will be passed to consumers to understand how much tariff hike you have, because sometimes they do keep it on paper and you will know if you're what they said bank A, bank B, and if you know the hours and all of that. If you do read your meter or your papers when they come in, you'll be able to understand this. Then you will know, okay, how much increase is my own rate going to be or not. And then you can find more details inside the paper on page 4. Dogara Osoba back petrol subsidy removal and service chiefs. At the downside of the paper, we have flood sweeps newlywed man in Ondo. Gunmen abduct 9 passengers. You can find the details on page 5, and that's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
On the Punch newspaper, Naira devaluation pushes up vehicles duties by 40%, with the rider custom raise exchange rate from 422 Naira per dollar to 589 Naira per dollar. Operators kick as import duties jump. Economics berate federal government, says policy will cause job losses, impoverish Nigerians and worsen the hardship. You can find all that story on page 2. And debt servicing rose to 1.24 trillion naira in the first quarter of 2023. This is a report. You can do well to read more on page 14. Discourse failed to remit 208 billion naira, says the federal government. Lagos Ibadan Greek lock trap motorists for hours. You can find that on page 4 and 5 of the Punch newspaper. Downside of the paper, 452,443 UTME candidate jostled for 72,578 medicine space. You can find more detail of that story inside the paper. Max gunmen kidnap Ogun businesswoman, villagers rescue farmer. You can find that story on page 4. Cleric warned Muslims not to borrow for Salah rams. You can find detail on page 12. We saw within the week and even the weekend where we saw that a ram can go as high as 400,000 naira. So we've seen the cleric is warning. So for those who are involved, you can read more of that warning on page 12, and that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On Daily Sun newspaper, statement coming from Ohaneze, Kano's release central to peace in Southeast. ISWAP Boko Haram in supremacy battles, scores killed as groups fight for territory control at Lake Chad and Borno. You can find the details on page 5. KYC bank customers experts oppose CBN's directive on social media handle. You can find the details on page 25. Muslim faithful lament ram foodstuff prices spike. We have coming from JAM 482,356 candidates jostle for 78,578 admission spaces in medicine and pharmacy. Aviation unions right to enable one of industries collapse. Berman 40% IGR deduction from NCAA and others. You can find the details on page 25. Kogi Guba, ACF chairman worried over rising violence. At the downside of the paper, we have IGP to meet mobile commanders, promises improve security. We have picture story from our left. Senate President Godwill Akpabio, his wife Unoma during Thanksgiving Mass at St. Anne Cathedral before her Iko Epene local government, Akwa Ibom State last weekend. And on the right side, we have from left to right, head of private clients, Sasfin Wealth South Africa, Flynn Robson, Chief Financial Officer, Zenith Bank PLC, Dr. Mukhtar Ahmed, and Chairman, BSG South Africa, Metoyati, during presentation of CFO of the Year Award to Dr. Adam at the 11th All Africa Business Leadership Award AABLA at King's Ballroom, Sun City, South Africa last weekend. And that's all the news on the Daily Sun newspaper.
On the Vanguard newspaper, coming from governor election, Elders Council raises alarm over Kogi's political violence. You can find detail on page 27. Zenith Bank's Adam wins CFO of the Year award. Autumn accuses Governor Ill of persecution. You can find that story on page 10. Court stop Kanu government from further demolition. You can find that story as well on page 10. And on subsidy, lack of license, foreign exchange, and others hindered fuel importation. The big story for the Vanguard says forest scarcity persists as CBN resumes intervention. With the rider banks ignore CBN directive on domiciliary account. Exchange rate converge around 770 naira per dollar. You can find all of that on page 19. Why we recommended suspension of the 23 LG chairman, coming from Benue Speaker. For those who are interested, you have to know more about that. You check page 10 of the Vanguard newspaper why there was a suspension of the 23 local government chairman. Butcher stoned to death in Sokoto for blasphemy. You can find more on page 6. Tackled insecurity head-on, Baptist Conference urges service chiefs. You can find more of that also story on page 9. Dogara to Tinubu brings subsidy cabal to book. You can find all of that on page 27. And on illegal mining, Taraba governor suspend activities. We can find more detail of that story on page 10. And I think other governors can also put their hand and then work together. Let us stop this illegal mining that takes place, because that's taking a lot of lives and it's still taking lives. And then talking about the erosion and all of that. So we hope to see governors putting hands together to stop that. And then even if it has to do on mining, you need to take permission, and then let's increase to the GDP of the country rather than bringing it down. So we hope to see other governors in their various states also doing something about this illegal mining, because we have a lot and a lot of illegal mining taking place. So we hope to see them doing something about that.
And the challenge for me when it comes to illegal mining, most especially in our middle belt in states like Nasarawa and the Plateau, and we know how rich we are with with minerals rather, and then we allow these resources to be handled that way. And then I wonder, in a time where we are having a country with so much economic chaos, we see allocations dropping, if not for that of May, but allocation have been dropping throughout the year, and we are seeing that states are not making money. We are seeing that workers are not being paid, and we are seeing, we saw on the paper where the House of Assembly have approved Mutwang's loan, yes, 15 billion exactly. Now imagine a situation where Plateau State were fully in control, 100% in control of course there will be private owners, but if these private miners are not illegal, then they will be remitting back to the state. So either way, we are still making money. But when we talk about illegal mining, we're seeing where all the resources of the state when it comes to solid minerals are going to these miners. And even if they're remitting anything, it will be illegally, because it will be more of a bribe going to the pocket of the individuals that are allowing them to go on with these illegal activities. So I'm just hoping that there is a wake up, because we cannot sit down and be having so much resources and then few individuals, foreigners precisely, are illegally taking these things away from us. It doesn't make sense, and this is something worth fighting. This is not something that the government should just sit down and be quiet about it, but it should be a war to be able to take back control, because the state needs the money. And I just hope
Rachel, when you see foreigners, I remember even that of the gold that was found in the far north, and then nothing has been said so far about. In fact, not I can't really tell if a lot of Nigerians are aware of something like that ever, and then that case has been swept under the carpet. Yes. So I really, really agree with you that the government need to do something. We are losing a lot, especially talking about this mining activity. I'm even more concerned about little children, boys that have lost their life as a result of this, because we keep digging. It's illegal,
so the standard procedures are not being followed. Exactly. Yeah, standard measures are not being put in place. So you have to go do it in the most dangerous way. But if it was a legal process, then every standard procedure would take in. How it's going to be done will be standard. How you go in, there will be protective measures put in place, but it's illegal, so you are going there unprotected, and a lot of people are dying due to illegal mining.
So we hope to see the governors, not just in Taraba, but see other governors putting their heads together. Let's tackle this. Still on the Vanguard newspaper, UK waiting for Tinubu to name ministers. Coming from the UK envoy, we are optimistic of improved security, says the acting IGP. You can find more detail on page 4. We have the picture story showing the Zenith Bank CFO that wins the award while he was receiving his award. And we have other column for sports and also other smaller stories on the front page of the paper. So you can do well, grab the Vanguard and read detail of stories of interest to you.
On national economy, $21 billion divestment in Nigeria's upstream oil sector, dangerous signal. We have a writer that folds the story that says stakeholders worry as multinationals capital expenditure in upstream sectors drop by 74% in 8 years, says more investment production needed. How your fingerprint will change the authentication game. You can find the details on page 10. Navigating Nigeria's debt, a prudent approach to sustainable development. At the downside of the paper, we have what you need to know about the new forex regime. You can find the details inside the paper on page 15. And we have a table showing the currency, the buying and the selling rate, inflation from June, July, and I predict a prediction for August. Since 2022 to 2021, and then we have commodity prices. We have Brent, gold, silver, and gas, and that's all the news on national economy.
Still on the world of business, let's take a look at the Business AM newspaper. Africa's external debt pile at $1.13 trillion, worrying, says the African Development Bank chief. You want to know more about that story? Do well to start reading the front page and continue on page 2. Still, we have African Development Bank wants project de-risks. You can find more on that on the news. And then on finance and investment, we have experts against the NIMESA FRS merger. You can find more of that story inside the paper, I think, in relation to all the merging that have been taking place.
Yeah.
So we've seen that here experts are against this merging of the NIMASA and FRS, merging. So you want to know more about that story, you can read it on the front page and continue on page 13. Taxation of online businesses is a comment for you know more about that. The big story for Business AM: Buhari Silva Kyari NNPC's $2.98 billion face refinery repairs hit dead end, with the rider local engineers at site sent home, fund down, drawn down, dry up. You can find more of that story inside the paper. We have TTB buys Union Bank 100%. We have other stories here. There's also Nigeria's 17-year high inflation, that's on commodity and agriculture. You can find more of that story on page 22. And we have a green transition for everybody. You can find more of that story inside the paper. And then also thoughtful consumption and well-being. You can find more on that Nordic series inside the paper. And that's all on Business AM.
On Punch Sports Extra, United, Chelsea, Liverpool begin Osimhen's negotiation. Okucha dazzles in Ronaldinho's legend match. Trust Ekong set for Watford return. We have White receives contract for Joshua fight. Champ Davido hails Adesanya. Arsenal must strengthen squad coming from Arteta. Chelsea reject Lukaku loan bid. Inter plays £52 million on Onana. And we have the big story: Fox to Eagle. Besiktas lead EPL trial in race to sign Iheanacho from Leicester City. You can find the details inside the paper. Ten Hag reluctant to sign new goalkeeper. Rivers bid insurance in Niger Super 8. The details can be found on page 7, and that's all the news on Punch Sport Extra.
On Nature News, we have Neymar hands over relief materials to families affected by Patigi boat mishap in Kwara State. You can find more detail of that story on the front page and also on page 3. The big story say why Lagos ranks the 4th least livable city in Global Index. We saw that last week, and they said with a relative low score of 32.2%, Lagos was just a little above Syria, war-torn capital Damascus, and a place behind Libya. So a lot is going on concerning the rank that Lagos is having as one of the least livable places. So you want to know more, especially for those who are living in Lagos and environment, or those who are planning to move to Lagos. I think it's something you should read on page 3 and see if you still want to consider moving over there. And then we have wealthy nation finance $100 billion climate aid at Paris summit coming from Macron. African Development Bank assure President Tinubu of support for agriculture and power. Nasarawa State government launches massive drainage cleaning to prevent flooding, and I think every other state should also move into that as soon as possible. With the flooding we're having, I think it's important that every state should do the same thing. And we have a story still on flooding. Abuja flooding, Trademore Estate resident lament government negligence of drainage channels. You can find more of that story on page 6, and we think the government should do something quick about the drainages in Abuja and every other state. Nigeria maintain world top 5 open defecation rate of 15 years. You can find detail on page 6, and no wonder we see that we can make billions out of that. So you want to know more about that, you can find that story on page 6. Downside, we have we have a story for sport lovers. So you can do well to grab the Nature News and read any story that is of interest to you.
On Business Day newspaper, strong naira versus low interest rate leaves investors guessing. That's the big story. We have FMDQ set to go live with its exchange trade derivatives, positioned to convert uncertainty to financial security for business. You can find the details on page 34. World Drug Day, Nigeria's drug war hits roadblock as new varieties emerge. Zenith Bank's Adam named CFO of the year, and we have NHS versus shareholders, what a hostile takeover means. You can find the details on page 30, and that's all the news on Business Day newspaper.
Rachel, just to round up the show, this World Drug Day, I think is something, let's just talk about it before we round up the show. It's important, because it's quite unfortunate how the social media and even the internet has made it quite easy for people to access any drug whatsoever that they want. You see somebody having just a little pain or whatever, and then it's easy for you to just go on social media and you Google it, some of the signs, and then you actually have a wrong diagnosis of actually what is wrong with you, and then people have abused drugs a lot. I'm going to look at those who are presently on the street because of abuse of certain drugs, and then you become addicted to certain of all of these drugs. So I think in a time where we're celebrating the World Drug Day, I think it's important that more awareness go into how people should stop abusing drugs, no matter how little the pain is. I know of a loved one who was actually, because of a little pain, she fell, and then she started, treating also kid, and then little did the family know that this patient was actually suffering from kidney failure. And before you realize it, it got out of hand until she could no longer urinate, because this is one of the first signs it's obvious that something is wrong with your kidney. And then anyway, we lost that dear family member. But then I think it's important, this is one out of many cases that Nigeria neglect, and we know that talking about drug, our liver is mostly what gets affected in all of this. So I think it's important that we have more awareness. Let's go down to the streets, down to the rural areas, down to even primary school, secondary school, because it will shock you to realize that some of these were people who have abused drugs or who have been introduced to drugs, started from even primary school, from your street, your area, and all of that. So I think it's important that we have more awareness, and then I think with that it will reduce the number of people who abuse drugs on a daily basis.
Of course, self-medication is very dangerous. One pain can be a symptom of so many other things. A headache can be a symptom for a brain tumor. A headache can be a symptom for your heart, a headache. So you can't be taking self-medication seriously, because it is dangerous, because you can end up becoming addicted to certain drugs, because you might feel, I'm having this pain, and you go to Google and you say, okay, when you keep having stomach ache at the top of your stomach, it means this is what is wrong. And before you know it, you start self-medicating, and then before you know, you're addicted to one drug and you are abusing it, and it can lead to your death. Perhaps a real diagnosis could have given you, this is what the problem. And so when it comes to drugs, it's not only hard drugs, because when we talk about World Drug Day, people will just quickly go to marijuana, people will go to cocaine, people will go to things like crystal meth, people will go to things that feel it is what drugs are all about. But when you find yourself giving yourself prescription by yourself, or when you find yourself taking drugs that could have been prescribed in the hospital, but then you get it illegally, in as much as it is a good drug, but you're taking it out of self-medication, then you can find yourself abusing drugs. And then these kind of awareness are also for you out there. So no matter the pain you feel, especially if it is persistent and refused to go, you thought it was just a normal headache, you took paracetamol, went to sleep, you wake up and it doesn't go, don't browse it. Okay, let the online doctors not be your doctors. Go to a hospital and be sure that you know what is wrong with you, and then you are taking, because you will just end up abusing drugs, and before you know it, you are just like any other person, either in the rehab or in the hospital, facing something that is life-threatening.
Of course, Rachel, so this is an awareness for all of us, for me too, because I know we are all guilty of this self-medication. Well, thank you so much, Rachel, for doing that with me. And thank you to our viewers, our supporters. Thank you to our producer, the crew members. Thank you to the general manager, and also to the Equa executive. Until we come your way again tomorrow, to have a blessed day ahead.